because that will get you stuck and you'll never go back to school.
So you're saying do something outside of getting into maybe a minimum wage job that is or would be considered traditional. You're saying explore the world instead.
Yeah. It's people think like if I don't go to school, that's the only way to become educated. You can still educate and become experienced by exploring the world, stepping outside of your comfort zone.
Right.
That's still an education in yourself. When I went abroad and I traveled a lot abroad, I really learned a lot about myself. And that really makes you question a lot about the things that you do.
And it makes you respect others.
Exactly. So I think that's invaluable. I think if you give that time for someone to really figure out what they're good at on their own, then they'll make the right decision. If they want to do education and go into college, that's great. But they may find another path that may be lucrative for them in terms of going to it and fulfilling and exploring.
So we're not saying don't go to school. We're not encouraging students not to go to school. I want to make that clear. And parents, if you are encouraging your children to go to school or your young adults to go to school, I support that 100%. It's just a way of doing it so that you don't get yourself into debt that you're paying without the degree at the end of it.
Yeah. So instead of going into something that you feel forced and say, I got to make a decision, you're going into something that you've had time to really think about and understand, and then you make that decision. So that's the way I think the best way for parents to explore it. And if you're like I have my niece and nephew, and they're not really sure if they want to do that, so I always coach them and talk to them about what I did and what I have friends do, and try to give my best advice about how to move forward.
Right. So now, when you say move forward, so we're in the 12th grade. And we've taken all of the tests necessary to say that we are academically smart enough to get into this college, and we're passing, and we know we're going to graduate in June. And we get to that graduation, or no, we put in our applications for school, right? And we've done some research, and we want our kids to go to these schools. Now, as far as the loan process, what should a parent be looking at as far as loans? Because what happens is this. Okay, you go to, what type of loans are there? What's Sallie Mae? What's Navient? Who is that?
Sallie Mae.
So, where does Sallie Mae go? Is she still around? What is she? What does she do? Right? In the loan process.
Right.
Navient, that's a new one. Who's that? The Department of Higher Education. Then there are these private loans. What does it mean to have a private loan versus a government loan? Or is there a government loan? Is that who Sallie Mae is? All these questions come up, right?
Who is that Sallie Mae?
Who is that Sallie Mae?
You don't want to know what I really think about Sallie Mae.
We can have a private conversation about that.
Offline,
yes. But, these are some of the questions that come up. What do we do? What kind of credit score do you need? Do you have to have credit to establish credit when you're trying to get a student loan? These are questions that don't come up until you're sitting in front of the financial aid department trying to figure out how to pay for this education.
That's so true.
Can you kind of unclog some of that, kind of help us through that?
I think, when you think about how you're going to pay for college, you treat it the same way as if you're going to get a car, get a house. It's an investment. It's an investment in your future.
Yeah.
And you really got to be careful when you select how you're going to pay for it. First thing is like you really got to choose the right institution, and you got to look at the overall cost. So some people think, okay, I got into this great school, and maybe an amazing school, maybe an Ivy League school.
Yes.
But can you really afford it? Now, if you got something where you got this wonderful scholarship that'll pay for 80% of it, go for it. If you don't, is that really the best decision? I looked and saw that, that's $41,000 to $45,000 a year for a Yale, Princeton, whatever. And some people may have the academic aptitude to really get into those schools, but may not have the means. Well, if you don't have the right kind of scholarship, it doesn't make sense to owe $200,000 for a bachelor's degree. It just doesn't. But going back, so that's talking about institution, you really want to think, what's the right institution for me? A lot of people skip over junior college. I went to junior college. I thought it was a great experience. You have smaller class sizes, better access to teachers. Their style of teaching is somewhat different, and it's a lot less expensive than the traditional private institutions, as well as the state and institutions. So it's a much better experience at a much cheaper price. And some people skip over that because they get caught up in the marketing and the prestige of a nice institution. Right. But it would save you a lot of money in the end. But still, with going into the loan aspect of it, you really want to understand what are the different ways you can finance your education.
Right.
You first want to look at scholarships and grants. Those are the things you want to take time in probably your second semester, or your first semester of
12th grade.
12th grade. Start really researching and looking what kind of scholarships and grants do I qualify for, and then really start looking at the process and really start applying for them, see what you qualify for. The second thing is looking at, it's a new thing now, crowdfunding for your college education.
Yes, I've seen that.
it's really growing now. It's like these I forgot what the contract's called, but you can actually do some. The site's called, I think, Upstart. You can actually get on there, and they take a portion of your future income and they'll help support you now and pay for your college, and they'll also give you a mentor to really help you through things. And I think people sometimes overlook the mentor part of it, which is huge.
It really is huge.
As a mentor, if I had a mentor, I would have not made the same decisions I did today.
Right.
So the mentor part is very big, and I think they really believe in entrepreneurship and really try to get that going as well, and really at least thinking about it. After you look at those options, then you look at the federal loans. Right. The federal loans are something that most people qualify for. They're income based. Mm-hmm. And you submit your application, see how much you qualify for. And most of the time at a bachelor level, if it's not, a private school or it's not Ivy League school, it'll pay for most of it.
Usually about 80%.
Yes. So you really have, and then you have some kinds of Pell Grants, things like that, depending on income. The last thing you want to absolutely try to avoid is private loans. Right. Private loans have the least consumer protections. Right. They don't care. They go after you it's hard to do a deferment. Somewhat nearly impossible. They do forbearance, but they usually charge you money every time you want to do it. You can't consolidate them. Right. And you need a credit score to usually get them.
That's right.
When I went to school, it was a very low credit score you needed. They increased it, so it's very, very hard. So most of the time you need a cosigner, which is usually your parents.
That's who they go to.
Yep. And then so your parents are on the hook now. So if you got to, as a child, you really got to understand the impact you're putting on your parents if they're going to get ready for retirement. They're also going to have to use retirement to pay for school debt. Right. So you really want to make sure you know what you want to do before you even start to explore that option of private loans, because they are really, really aggressive if you do not pay. Right. So that has to be the absolute last resort.
And their interest rates are really high.
They're variable. So at some point, mine went up to 15%.
That's what I mean.
And 6%. Mm-hmm. So you really have to be careful when you do private loans.
Yes. Wow. Okay, so now I'm out of high school, and I've got my student loans in place, and now I'm starting school. And now I need to buy books. I need to live somewhere. I need food. I need toiletries, all these things. Is that a part of my student loan, or is that additional money that I'm spending? What am I doing here?
Yes, that is usually, you can include it in the package for student loans, but then it increases your overall debt. Right. So if you are able to get a part-time job and pay for some of that, a portion of it, it may seem hard at the time. If you can handle it, it's better to decrease your units you take per semester and go over by a semester or two. People get horrified. I'm going to go over 4 years.
Okay.
Who cares?
And what's going to happen?
Who cares? I mean, as long as you don't take a 4-year program and turn it into 10 years, you're good.
Right.
But if a 4-year program turns into 5 years, you're fine.
It's fine.
You're fine. Because you think of the debt, it doesn't go away for 25, 30 years.
Right.
So a year is not really going to make much of a difference.
And that's the other thing. People relax. I'm telling you, when a child gets into the 12th grade, it's this heightened area of pressure. Like it turns up, and everyone's like, okay, what's going to happen now? 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 They're 17 or 18 years old. I think you should just kind of, you want them to go to school, but you don't want it to become a 25-year burden. So you want to kind of balance it. Right? Am I on the right track?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. My wife and I talk about, because she has her PhD as well. Right. We met in graduate school. That life was easier when she was doing her internship, because she didn't have all that debt to worry about while she was in school. There's much more flexibility, much more things she could afford to do versus now. So it's a shame that you work so hard for something for so long and sacrifice so much, and at the end it's really hard to get it because of all the debt that you owe.
Right. So, like I said, this show is not about not going to school. This is about making wise choices
Exactly.
so that you can go to school and enjoy your college experience. And when you get out, start your life and not have so much debt that you can't do anything but pay your debt off or focus on that.
Right.
So you want a balance. And that's
Really.
what we're talking about today.
Absolutely.
Is having a balance.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is Miss Charliine, and you're having lunch with the Finance Bunch. And today, again, we have in the studio, his name is Troy Seeley, and he's talking about debt solutions for college. And you have a company, and I want you to when we come back, I want you to tell me a little bit about your company and what someone can do to get in contact with you.
Okay.
You're having lunch with the Finance Bunch, and you can hear us on www.acceleratedradio.net/ARP. You can also go to TuneIn Radios and search for Accelerated Radio. You can find us there. We're on every Friday from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. You're having lunch with the Finance Bunch. And we have again in our studio Mr. Troy Seeley, and we're talking about debt solutions and his wonderful company that can help us through some of the debt that we have acquired. Here in the United States, 2005 Forbes said we have $1.5 trillion in student debt, and that's not including, credit card debt that students have borrowed from parents, working towards getting a college education. We're trying to sort it out so that the future students may not acquire so much debt, and the ones who are in debt, we're trying to help them figure out how to get out of debt, because this is a bill you have to pay. So, Troy, let's talk about some of the questions maybe people might have about debt. So we went through in, the first few minutes of this conversation, we talked about how people got into debt. We're in the 12th grade and we want to go to college, and then some of the decisions that we can make that may make that cost less. And so now I want to talk about what can we do once we have gotten ourselves into debt? What are some of the things we can do that may possibly help us get out of debt?
The first question I ask when someone, contacts me and says, I have a problem with my student loans. I really need help. I say, well, help me understand the type of debt you have. Do you have federal loans and do you have private loans? And a lot of the times they say, what's that?
Right. That's why I said at the beginning, who is Sally Mae? What's a private debt? Who's Navient?
So the federal loan, it's so complicated now because they change a lot. So the federal loans are directly from the federal government, and they have all these benefits, and they're usually fixed, and it's much easier. They usually go subsidized, unsubsidized. You usually have those two options as loans.
Right.
Now, most time, if you can't afford it, you go to a for-profit institution, they really push for the private loan aspect of it. And those loans usually, let me go take a step back. The private loans now, majority of them are owned by, Sally Mae, which has recently changed its name to Navient. So Sally Mae no longer exists. I think it had a lot of negative press, and so they changed their name to Navient. Still the same company. Still the same practices they do. Also, what happened is that the federal government now has a contract with Navient to service federal loans. So a lot of people will see Navient for their federal loans and their private loans.
Right,
so there's a difference
between debt servicer.
They're a servicer. They're not the lender, they're a servicer. And a lot of people get confused, like, it has Sally Mae on there in the federal government, they must be my lender. No, they're the servicer of your federal loans. They cannot be the lender of federal loans. And then they have private loans, which are their own separate entity, and they control all the rules around the repayment of those loans. So you might get one bill that says them all, says all of them, but the two separate rules that applies to federal and private loans. If one goes, and then I ask the question, okay, well, how much do you owe? Are you in default? And that changes everything if you're in default versus not default. If you're in default, the federal option is to consolidate.
Right.
You can do a William D. Ford consolidation, which really will help get you hopefully out of default, and then put you in good standing. But sometimes they require to make some payments for that. They require to do different things to prove that you're able to pay it once that's done. There's different options. People got to understand the different options for repayment: income-based, income contingent. Also, I think there's a standard repayment option that you're paying, all of the interest plus the principal. that's usually higher.
Much higher.
Much higher. So it's kind of, you looking at, look at like the mortgage. You got your,
Right.
you got your interest only payment, or you got your interest plus principal payment. The same concept applies.